Imagine looking up at the night sky tonight. You see the moon gliding across the darkness, the stars flickering like distant candles, and the sun rising every morning without fail. For thousands of years, every human being who ever lived looked at that exact same sky and came to a single, obvious conclusion. We are completely still, and the entire universe is spinning around us. It made perfect sense. You don't feel the ground beneath your feet moving at incredible speeds. You feel safe, secure, and firmly planted at the absolute center of creation. To believe anything else wasn't just foolish, it was insane. It was a direct challenge to common sense, to philosophy, and to the absolute authority of the Church. But 500 years ago, in a cold, lonely tower overlooking the Baltic Sea, one man dared to look at the heavens and see a completely different reality. He didn't use a telescope. He didn't have advanced computers. Armed with nothing but primitive wooden instruments and the raw power of mathematics, he pulled the Earth out of its comfortable position and set it spinning through the terrifying emptiness of space. His name was Nicolaus Copernicus, and this is the story of how a quiet, deeply religious scholar accidentally started the most dangerous scientific revolution in human history. To understand the sheer magnitude of what Copernicus did, we have to travel back to the late 15th century. The world he was born into was one of absolute certainty. For over a millennium, European thought had been dominated by the ideas of two ancient Greeks, Aristotle and Ptolemy. Their model of the cosmos was elegant, deeply comforting, and fiercely protected by religious authorities. According to this view, the Earth was a heavy, immovable sphere resting at the exact center of the universe. Surrounding the Earth were a series of invisible, crystalline spheres like nested glass bowls. Each sphere carried a planet, the moon, or the sun, turning in perfect eternal circles. Beyond the furthest sphere lay the realm of God and the angels. This wasn't just astronomy, it was theology. If humanity was the crowning achievement of divine creation, it only made sense that God would place us at the center of everything. The entire universe existed to revolve around us. To question this structure was to question the place of humans in God's grand design. If the Earth wasn't the center, then where was God? Where was heaven? The psychological and spiritual stakes were unimaginably high, but there was a problem with this perfect cosmic machine. It didn't actually work. As astronomers watched the planets year after year, they noticed strange anomalies. Sometimes, a planet like Mars would suddenly slow down, stop, and appear to move backward across the sky for a few weeks before resuming its forward journey. This bizarre phenomenon, known as retrograde motion, was a nightmare for ancient mathematicians. To explain it without moving the Earth from the center, Ptolemy had to invent a dizzying system of wheels within wheels. He claimed that planets didn't just orbit the Earth, they moved in smaller circles called epicycles, while those smaller circles moved along a larger orbit. As centuries passed, the system became more and more bloated. Astronomers had to add epicycle upon epicycle, shifting centers and complex mathematical illusions just to force the night sky to match their theories. The universe had become an ugly, chaotic mess of geometry. It was a machine with too many moving parts, held together by sheer willpower and religious dogma. Enter Nicolaus Copernicus. Born in 1473 in the vibrant trading city of Torun, Poland, he was not a loud, boisterous rebel looking to tear down society. He was a quiet, introverted man of immense intellect. Orphaned at a young age, he was taken in by his uncle, a powerful bishop who ensured the young Nicholas received the finest education Europe could offer. Copernicus studied at the University of Krakow before traveling to Italy, the beating heart of the Renaissance. There, he immersed himself in canon law, medicine, mathematics, and astrology. He was a true Renaissance man, a doctor who healed the sick, a lawyer who managed church property, a diplomat, and an economist. Astronomy was merely his passion, a hobby he pursued in the quiet hours of the night. But Italy gave him something invaluable, exposure to ancient Greek texts that had been forgotten for centuries. He discovered that a few ancient thinkers had actually suggested the Earth might move. It was a radical, discarded idea, but it planted a seed in his brilliant mind. When Copernicus returned to Poland, he took up his official duties as a canon at the cathedral in Frombork, an isolated town on the edge of the freezing Baltic Sea. He lived in a fortified tower, away from the noise of the world. And it was there, in the bitter cold, that he began his life's true work. Night after night, he climbed to the top of his tower. Without a telescope, which would not be invented for another century, he relied on simple wooden instruments to measure the angles of the stars and planets. He tracked their positions, filled notebooks with endless calculations, and began to look at the bloated Ptolemaic system with a critical eye. He realized that the ancient models were too complicated to be the work of a perfect creator. God, Copernicus believed, would design a universe of supreme elegance and simplicity. The current system lacked harmony, and so he decided to perform a radical thought experiment. What if we just change the vantage point? What if the Earth is not the stationary center of the universe, but just another traveler? The moment Copernicus placed the sun at the center of the model and set the Earth in motion, something miraculous happened. The chaotic math of the universe suddenly collapsed into a thing of breathtaking beauty. The clumsy wheels within wheels vanished. The mysterious retrograde motion of Mars, which had baffled astronomers for 1,500 years, was suddenly explained by a simple optical illusion. Mars didn't actually stop and move backward. It only appeared to do so because the Earth, orbiting on a faster inner track, was overtaking Mars, much like a fast car passing a slower one on a highway. The math was clean. The order of the planets finally made logical sense based on their distance from the Sun. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, it was an intellectual masterpiece. But as Copernicus looked at his beautiful charts, a wave of profound dread washed over him. He knew exactly what he had just done. He hadn't just solved a mathematical puzzle. He had unraveled the fabric of reality. If the Earth was spinning on its axis every 24 hours and hurtling around the Sun at incredible speeds, why didn't people fly off into space? Why didn't a stone dropped from a tower land miles away? In the 16th century, there was no concept of gravity or inertia to explain these things. To the average person, the idea of a moving Earth was physically impossible and completely absurd. But the theological implications were even more dangerous. By removing the Earth from the center, Copernicus was effectively demoting humanity. We were no longer the focal point of the cosmos. We were just living on a spinning rock, drifting through a vast, indifferent ocean of stars. If the Earth was just another planet, then the stars must be unimaginably far away, creating a universe vastly larger than anyone had ever dreamed. This expansion of the universe threatened to swallow the intimate relationship between God and man. Copernicus knew that if he published his findings, he would face immediate ridicule, professional ruin, and potentially the wrath of the Holy Inquisition. So he chose silence. For decades, Copernicus kept his grand theory a closely guarded secret. He wrote a short, anonymous manuscript called the Commentariolus, summarizing his ideas, and shared it only with a tiny circle of trusted, highly educated friends. He spent the next 30 years refining his mathematical proofs, checking and rechecking his calculations, terrified of making a single error that his critics could tear apart. He grew old, his eyesight faded and his hair turned white, but his monumental book titled De Revolutionibus Orbium Coelestium, on the revolutions of the heavenly spheres, remained locked away in his desk. He was determined to take his dangerous secret to the grave. The world simply wasn't ready for the truth, but destiny had other plans. In 1539, a brilliant young German mathematician named Georg Joachim Rheticus arrived in Frombork. Rheticus had heard rumors of the old astronomer's radical theory and had traveled hundreds of miles to learn the truth. When he read Copernicus's hidden manuscript, he was utterly spellbound. He saw the future of science written on those pages. Rheticus became the catalyst Copernicus needed. With endless enthusiasm, the young scholar begged, pleaded, and pressured the aging astronomer to allow the book to be printed. Copernicus, sensing his own mortality and comforted by Rheticus's devotion, finally relented. He handed over his life's work. Rheticus rushed the precious manuscript to a printer in Nuremberg, Germany, but the danger was far from over. A local theologian overseeing the printing, terrified of the religious backlash, secretly inserted an unauthorized preface into the front of the book. This preface claimed that the heliocentric theory shouldn't be taken as literal truth, but merely as a clever mathematical tool to help calculate calendars. It was a cowardly act of censorship designed to defuse the ticking intellectual bomb. By the time the book was finally printed in 1543, Copernicus was dying. He had suffered a massive stroke that left him paralyzed and slipping away from consciousness. According to a legendary account, on May 24, 1543, a messenger rushed into the dying man's bedroom, carrying the very first printed copy of On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, fresh from the printing press. They placed the book into Copernicus's frail, trembling hands. He opened his eyes, looked upon the physical manifestation of his life's secret devotion, and closed his eyes for the last time. He died that very day, completely unaware of the absolute chaos his book was about to unleash upon the world. At first, the Copernican revolution was a quiet one. Because of the falsified preface and the incredibly complex mathematics inside, very few people understood the book's true significance. For decades, it was used merely as a practical guide for navigation and reforming the calendar. But truth, once unleashed, cannot be contained forever. Decades later, a brilliant Italian friar named Giordano Bruno read Copernicus and took the idea even further, suggesting that the universe was infinite, filled with countless suns and inhabited worlds. For his radical ideas, Bruno was burned at the stake by the Inquisition. Soon after, Johannes Kepler used Copernicus's model to discover that planets move in elliptical orbits, unlocking the true laws of planetary motion. And then came Galileo Galilei. Pointing his newly invented telescope at the heavens, Galileo saw the moons of Jupiter and the phases of Venus, visual proof that Copernicus had been right all along. Galileo was dragged before the Inquisition, threatened with torture, and forced to spend the rest of his life under house arrest. But the dam had burst. The old world was dead. Nicolaus Copernicus changed everything. By moving the earth, he moved humanity. He forced us to confront our own insignificance, to realize that we are not the literal center of all things. But in doing so, he gave us something infinitely greater, the truth. He taught us that true knowledge requires us to look past our biases, to question our senses, and to dare to see the universe as it truly is, no matter how terrifying that reality might be. The next time you look up at the night sky, remember the lonely scholar in his cold northern tower. He took away our comfortable, stationary world, and in exchange, he gave us the stars. If this journey into the past has captivated you, don't forget to leave a like. It's the best way to support this project and keep history alive. To continue unraveling the mysteries of the most fascinating figures who ever walked this earth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss our next trip through time. Until next time.